All right. Hello. All right. Hello, folks. My name is Julia Scott, and I am with Baltimore Racial Justice Action for BRJA. And I want to welcome you all to the February BRJA 13th of the month. Next slide. Just some virtual housekeeping. If you are able to keep your video on, that is highly encouraged, but we also understand that people like their privacy. Please mute yourself when you're not speaking. However, we do have some possible questions and like conversations, so your voice is encouraged and welcome. You can also utilize the chat during these times. Next slide. Just to kind of, we're going to be talking about a lot of things. So we want to have a content and recording advisory. We are recording. These things are on our YouTube channel, but also considering the historic nature of racism in this country and how it's perpetuated on Black and non-Black folks of color. And we are going to be examining some of that in this topic. Please just be aware to take care of yourself during this discussion, as with all discussions regarding racism and oppression. And so we just wanted to make sure you all knew that ahead of time. Next slide. And this is our topic for February 13th, all about love, decolonizing and economizing Black love. So we can get started. I'm going to go to the next slide. I want us to start with the wonderful bell hooks. Love is an action of an act of will, both an intention and an action. This topic, obviously, in the title of the event, comes from Bell Hooks' book, All About Love. But today we're going to be discussing love, but also media, economizing it, and how it actually works. So, next slide. I want folks to take some time to look at these wonderful pictures. Some of you might be familiar with them. There are the Obamas here. We have Niecy Nash and Jessica Betts, her wife. And we have a wonderful couple from This Is Us, Beth and Randall. I'm forgetting her name. I think it's Beth. And so I just want to look at those pictures and think about, just kind of sit with them for a second. Kind of think about what is going through your mind when you see them. Maybe you watch the show This Is Us. Maybe you are a fan of Niecy Nash. She just won an Emmy. And her and her wife are very supportive of each other. Obviously, we have been watching the Obamas since they were in office. And I want to have a quick conversation about some of this. Let's go to our next slide. What do you see when you look at these pictures? What story about love is being told in these pictures? And what resonates with you when you're looking at them? So we have a small group today. So I'm not sure if Toyin, is that your name, Toyin?
Yes, it's Toyin.
Hello, Toyin, welcome. Did you want to answer any of these questions? I can certainly add my thoughts.
So I'm aware that I'm actually based in London. So
Oh, cool. Welcome.
Thank you. So my viewpoint would be from over here, what I would see, on the screens over here, and my communities and what I'm surrounded by. So it might be a bit different from what everybody else on the call might be.
No, we're welcome, please.
Thank you. For me, I just see people, being unapologetic and being, for me, it's like a celebration, and it shouldn't have to be a celebration for us to be celebrating, Black love. It shouldn't have to be like that. But I feel that some over here, it's a big deal when you see that on the screens in the media. And almost it's a narrative over here where it's quite not rare, but it's not, they're trying to force the narrative of interracial couples over here. So when you see that, it's just like, wow, you're calling people to come and have a look, because it's not so common.
Okay.
So it's just, yeah, it's just wonderful to see. And it resonates with me because that's what I'm used to. And that's, my surroundings within my family and my community over here. So.
All right.
It so resonates because hi, I'm Erica Taylor. It so resonates because, as Adar would say, one of our greatest exports, Adar, do you want to finish it?
is anti-Blackness.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Toya, we're so glad you can join us. But one of the greatest exports of the United States is anti-Blackness and is white supremacy. And that feeds into every single thing, including marketing and advertising.
And I think it's also interesting. I was going to say, I remember when Barack Obama went out for president, I was in college. And so I had a very different, I think, understanding. When I saw the Obamas, I was like, that's what I want. Like, I think a lot of myself and my friends all were just like, they were kind of the fairy tale. Like, they're both accomplished. They were making strides for the Black community, like all of these kind of things that we kind of told ourselves when we saw in the pictures. I'm sure a lot of it was like projection, but it was also, they were kind of telling us that they were running for president, they were running for the first family. And that's what I thought like love was just going to be like. I would go to college and get my degree, and I was going to meet my man who's going to have his college, experience and his degree, and we were going to like build together. We were not going to, well, I would not want to be president. I did not want to date anyone who was going to be president, but we were going to just be, just out here succeeding and happy and in love together. And that was the story. And even more, when you see a show like This Is Us, what made Randall and Beth so, I think, tangible was like they felt real. Like there was like a part of the season when, we were like, are they gonna get divorced? And I remember people like, I'm not watching this show. They divorced these two people. Like they felt real, and their love felt real. And I think the story, like the love story of them was beautiful and complicated, but it felt like something that my friends have experienced. And that resonated with me because you want to see all the realities of love, not just like the good, beautiful fairy tale parts, but the hard, and you all being there for each other and people listening to each other. So those things are beautiful, and they resonate with me on a very real level. But what's also interesting to hear you say is that, across the pond, very similar kind of experiences, I think, with what we see in media around Black relationships and love. But yeah.
So one of the things that I remember when Barack and Michelle came into the forefront, and I felt the weight of the race. Like we have, and I'm sure they did too, we have to support that relationship. That is one relationship that, that cannot fail, that cannot be blemished, right? Because then it feels like we put that weight on, like you have to hold up the race, right? Like you have to be exemplary. And so it is a constant in a white supremacist world, it's a constant to, and I think that's very much related to affirming one's humanity. Like we can do this too. We can have stable relationships too, because so much of the images or the messaging tells us that we cannot do that. And then feeling a sense of release when Michelle will be like, yeah, he gets on my nerves, right? Like the realness in it too. So holding both of those things simultaneously, right? So the realness, that the glimpses of realness that she offered, and also just like, y'all better not do this. Everybody keep everybody else away from, because we heard about like infidelity in presidents and stuff like that. Not with this one. This was not something we were going to let go down.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I remember like how Barack and Michelle Obama were denigrated. You know, there were pictures of Michelle Obama. Oh, she's a man. She wears the pants in the family. You know, I mean, all of these things, that's not real. I mean, all of these scurrilous rumors about the state of their relationship. And I compare that now to another former president who has been married multiple times, cheated on, you know, two of his three wives. And everybody is holding their relationship up. Well, not everybody, but a very specific base of folk is holding their relationship up as this paragon of love, blah, blah, blah. And it takes me back to the central question of, in even these images, you know, what in all images, what is being sold to us? And we know that images of Black love is counterculture. I mean, it's just subversive in the messaging that we are given, that is so counterculture to the normal messages that we receive about Black love and relationships.
You know, I wonder in the picture of Beth and Randall. So now I'm thinking about
wait a minute. Which was that the picture on the very left?
That's the This Is Us.
The picture. Listen, I must be the only person who has never seen that show. So okay,
we got to get you a Hulu subscription.
It's the picture.
So on the left, so this is Beth and Randall. And when I harken back to other images in sitcoms and things like that, TV dramas, I harken back to The Facts of Life, to Different Strokes, where the family has essentially, and Facts of Life, it's a white boarding school. Kim Fields plays the Black person. Her love interests, I believe, were always Black, right?
Okay, that's not how I remember it, but go ahead.
Okay, it might be wrong, but certainly in Different Strokes, Todd Bridges' love interest was always Black, and so I wonder if what that message is around, even when raised and reared in a transracial family, the Black boy or the Black person still seeks Black, you know what I mean? But here's the thing, so that it's not a threat for them going after the girls and women that they see in their all white immersed families.
After what is not a threat, them going after white women.
Exactly.
Which is always that plays on the racial stereotypes that have long been a part of America. Black men are going to be lusting after white women, and therefore that's why we have to lynch them. That's why we have to jail them. That's why we don't want them in our neighborhoods. So the ads and commercials really are a 21st century way of even keeping that message alive, because in so many of the commercials, and Toyin, I am so anxious to hear about what is happening in London, but here, if there are interracial couples, it is mostly white men with Black women. It is very rarely Black men, white men with Black women. Yes, it's very rarely Black men with white women. And so the racialized messages of that if it is white men with Black women, well, that tracks with the history of white men raping, Black women who they enslaved. It tracks with the system of white male patriarchy. If it is Black men with white women, which in this country, if we're talking about interracial relationships, that's in terms of Black people and Black men, it is Black men having relationships outside of their race. That is the thing that statistically is the norm when we talk about interracial relationships. But if that is shown on a commercial, then there is a way that that upsets the white patriarchal structure and the white patriarchal racial dynamic structure in the United States. And Toyin, is it that same way in London, or are the interracial couples different?
Yeah, so it's different over here in terms of it is black men with white women. That is very common, especially during 70s, 80s. That's a very common thing. And it got to a point where it was almost like a fashionable thing for white women to be with a black man because of the outcome of, they used to call it the brown babies. You know, everybody, it's like, it was like an accessory. That's what that was kind of like the in thing that they used to say. For white women, they just wanted the baby, the brown babies that, you know, and you can't see my fingers, but I'm saying inverted commas. That's basically what it was. It was like a trend. They didn't want, yeah, they didn't kind of, you know, it was like, yeah, it was just almost like it was a thing to do. And that's very common over here. And in terms of it, like, you know, there's so many layers in terms of when you look at a black woman with a white man, there's so many layers in terms of, you've got the whole colorism thing. So you've got a lot of women who were bullied for being dark skinned when they were in school. So they said they don't really want to go through what, you know, they don't want their children to go through what they went through. So that's another thing that's happening in over here in terms of black women. So I'm not sure in terms of, you know, where you are, if that's one of the reasons, but that's a really big, strong thing. And it's starting to become common. For black women to be with white men, and also as well, it's a level of how they're treated. So you've got a lot of black women saying that white men or people or you know, from different communities that are not black, they're treating them so much better. So there's a whole there's different layers to it, you know.
I've seen those conversations, and as someone who watches a lot of television, particularly television from other countries, I watch a lot of British TV. There are a lot of like interracial couples on TV shows, and usually if there is a black woman, like they will put her with the white man with the quickness. And and my dad he's always like, they never find her a brother in these shows. And I was just like, I don't know. But that makes a lot of sense considering what I've seen just like in British TV and in British media that I've kind of consumed. I do want to go as like, Erica, you're kind of forming your next thought to the next slide, because this kind of gets into that, right? Like the idea of the media that we see. And
can you see the chat, Toyin, or no?
Yes, I can see the chat.
Okay.
So Toyin, I just wanted to say that it seems like the realities are similar in both places. I wondered though, like in advertisement, are you seeing the reverse as Adar talked about?
Yes, so well, in advertisement, it always is the case where it's always a black man with a white woman, always. And it's almost like, you know, it's sort of like a rarity to see black couples. And when you do, it's like, you know, it's like a bit of a shock. Oh my goodness, who did the casting for this? Or, you know, even with shows, it is almost like they need to kind of tick the diversity quota. That is basically, you know, how it is over here, which is really sad. You know,
that's really
it's
interesting.
It's forced.
And that's really interesting because Adar was talking about how in our advertisement, it is white man, black woman.
I'm gonna have Dana actually show those pictures. Some of these, this has been going on obviously for a while. But so the ones you see here for like Macy's, United Colors of Benetton, and there's a Banana Republic kind of holiday you know, ad where you see, you know, like mixed race couples or interracial couples. And usually we see a lot of white men with black women. And I remember when I was younger, we would see, I used to get 17 magazine, I'm not even sure that's still a thing, but they would have a lot of like interracial couples in those magazines, and I never really thought that much about it. Like I was just like, oh, okay. But also when you're a teenager, you may not necessarily be thinking about the relationships between the what you're being sold. But for the next questions, the next slide, I want us to take some time to think about what do you see when you look at these pictures in comparison to the first group of pictures that we saw, the first set of these kind of Black couples, whether they're fictional or real in love. What do you see when you look at these pictures, and what is being sold to you about love in these pictures that we just saw? And more importantly, how does this relate to what is being sold?
I'm so glad we're getting into the economics of this.
I mean, I could be flip and be like, hey, if I buy these right clothes, I can make a Black woman smile because she's always walking around angry. You'll have to flip back to, you'll have to flip back to the other one to see where she's been forcibly made to smile from the Benett's commercial.
Well, she's happy. She's happy.
You know, what is really striking to me and what the change that we've seen is that when there were a lot of when interracial couples in advertising first became a thing, the colorism was very evident, right? They were casting light-skinned sisters with the white men. Now we see a trend where they're going to, did we lose Erica?
Sure. Maybe.
Where we are going, you know, the advertisers are going to darker skinned women. And Toya and I feel you when you say like it's like that's you know, that's the thing. And I see that here, and it says a lot to me. I mean, and I'm still trying to figure this out, so I'm not coming with any answers, but I'm saying that, you know, when there is a switch to darker skinned women, and to especially positions like this one where the guy is grabbing the Black woman's head, it makes me wonder whether there is, again, this subliminal nostalgia for the plantation dynamics of it all. You know,
yeah.
That is what this makes me think about.
I think it's interesting because, like, I think on one end, obviously, the amount of studies and data that goes into making an advertisement, I'm sure they have had at one point like Black couples, and they were just like, this is not selling well, or this is not the, you know, people were complaining about this. And I think, you know, one of the reasons we kind of even got on this topic is we were talking about the fact that I was watching a commercial recently, and it was like an older, like Black couple, but their grandkids did not look Black. And I was like, whose grandkids are those supposed to be? And I was like, oh, it must be like obviously whoever their child is married someone from a different race. And I thought it was so, I was like, that is so wild. Like they're just selling vitamins. And you know, I think that it just goes to show when you're cognizant of these things, those things start to pop out. But I feel like maybe years ago, like I wouldn't have noticed that. I'm not sure, but certainly I think that they do a lot of kind of marketing. I think that in America right now, race is obviously still a very big topic, no matter if people want to admit that or not. But I think there is this kind of mixing of America that's happening to make it seem like maybe that the racial stuff is not a real issue. Like, you know, obviously these things are happening. You know, racism can't exist. Like, look at these beautiful, like, you know, wonderful mixed kids. And it's like, okay. Like, I'm
Can
not
I
sure
say,
what...
Julie, that's exactly what it is. I mean, when we're talking about the marketing and ad agencies, That's exactly the conversation. And I was sharing with people earlier today about this like 1921 interview that Joe Biden did when there was a question about policing, right? And the questioner was concerned about the overregulation of policing, because how else would they be able to go and catch criminals in Black communities if they weren't able to do their jobs because of over, the over regulating them, that profession. Biden was giving an answer like, oh, but when I look at TV commercials and 1 out of 6 is, or 1 out of 5 or whatever he said, are interracial couples, that lets me know that things aren't that bad. So first of all, it had nothing to do with the question, but next of all, he is taking that overrepresentation of interracial couples and using that as a feel-good America is getting over racism moment. And yes, and that is what is being sold. And let me say one more thing. And one of the studies that I saw, it was talking about how the ads are really made for white consumers. So not only is a particular product being sold, but what is also being sold is this utopia United States, where racism is really a thing of the past because we're all getting along and we're all interracial couples. And tell me then how that does not influence policies. Because why would we have policies about anti-Black hate if we're all getting along like a Bennington commercial? Why would we need to pass hate laws? Why would we need to pay attention to communities who are having voting access truncated? We don't need those things. Right. We don't need any of those things because look at our advertisements. We're all getting along. And finally, I think it bears saying that 67.7% of ad and marketing creative teams in the US are white.
Yes, they are.
They're the ones making those ads, and they're making those ads for white comfort. And
So
I'm sorry.
So, but lest we forget that something that is as American or United States American, there's 2 other countries in North America that we keep forgetting about, but that is as apple pie and vanilla is Cheerios, and Cheerios severely got its hand slapped with the with the ad where the little girl was putting Cheerios on her father's head, and because it's supposed to help be heart healthy. The backlash against Cheerios and the little girl is and it was one, I think it was one of the early innovators in trying to push this idea of interracial, the idea that our path towards being post-racial is interracial relationships.
Absolutely.
Yes, yes. And it was one of the first commercials, right, that really did a campaign around this interracial family unit. And they did get severe backlash.
All right. So I'm going to ask Dana to share the next slide about like why I think we kind of went over like why we're talking about this, but maybe it is us kind of thinking about what are the first images of Black love that you all remember in the media. Who was it? If you can remember who it was, what do you remember about it, and how did it make you feel?
Mine was in the Jeffersons, and it was Lionel and Jenny. And I probably am dating myself for those who never watched the Jeffersons. It's a story about this entrepreneur who has a cleaning business, is risen, and he has these neighbors. They are a biracial couple, and their daughter's name is Jenny. played by the mom is actually the woman who played the mom in that scenario is Lenny Kravitz's mom. And so that was the first one about it. But I also remember her being thinking she's incredibly beautiful, and wanting to be like her. And I wonder what subliminal messages about what kinds of relationships create that kind of Black beauty may have seeped in from that. I think the other couple would have been from Good Times, not James in Florida, but actually the middle daughter and Keith.
Oh, Anthony
The daughter and
Florida.
Keith, yep. Yep.
Florida and James Evans gave message of struggle love.
Thelma and Keith, yep.
Thelma, yes, Thelma. You know what's so funny? Now that I'm thinking about it, I had originally said like the Cosbys was a you know, very impactful. Obviously, everyone in my household had watched the Cosbys. But I think as someone who was getting older and kind of recognizing like my own like kind of interests, probably shows like Living Single, and you know, A Different World, you know, the kind of backlog, you know, episodes. I would watch Moesha, had a lot of Black couples, you know, where I would watch them and be like, oh, okay. And but I also remember like obviously Martin. Martin was so impactful by the time I was in like coming of age. But I will never forget when I was in college, I had taken some class and my teacher was teaching us bell hooks. And we talked about the show Martin, and she was the first person to point out to me the kind of like colorism aspects of Martin that I had never thought about. And she was like, why is it that, you know, like Martin and Gina, I said, oh yeah, you know, they're kind of what you would call back then like couple goals. And she was like, but you notice that, you know, Gina's light skin and, you know, she can't cook. Like, you know, all of these kind of things that she has. But Pam, all the things that Martin says that he wants, Pam actually embodies. But he doesn't go after Pam. Like, why is that? And I was like,
not only doesn't go after her, always tries to fight her.
Yeah, makes fun of her, like
right, denigrates her.
And I was like, oh wow, like I didn't notice that. And it made me like look, even though like I still like obviously like I find Martin a formative show from growing up. It's so hard for me like to look at it now and I feel like there's so many issues with it. But those were examples to me at the time of like Black love, of what it meant to be like with Black people, Black community, Black jokes, but that these kind of couples were at the center of these kind of like little TV families. And I was like, I'm gonna have something similar when I get older. And it made me feel like there was something to look forward to and that it was all gonna like work out, and that like, you know, like love is real, like Black love is real. Granted, my parents very much in love, but seeing it on TV was like something very different, right? So those were kind of my first like images and, you know, reminders of that. Anthony, did you want to share? You haven't heard your lovely voice.
Hey everybody. Yeah, Good Times was mine as well. And it's interesting because reruns of it seems like the shows that were younger kind of didn't count in my head. There were other shows that I watched that had Black couples, but Good Times and Cosby Show stood out to me as well. I never felt like I don't know, it felt distant from the Cosby Show. It felt like Good Times felt closer. But like I said, that was me. Erica was saying at the same time, but yeah, it showed me the struggle love. That's what it was, and that like love was hard, and that you need to find a partner that to be poor with, basically. And it was just the even the hardness in Florida and James, even though they loved each other and stayed with each other, they like he didn't want her to go back to school, like all those kind of things. It was struggle love. It was struggle love. So
struggle love.
You know what's so funny. I remember there was an episode where I forgot what they were arguing over. It might have been the whole school thing, but she says to him, like, I don't want to walk in front of you, James. Like, I don't want to walk behind you either. I want to walk beside you. And I remember watching that. I mean, of course, I thought it was like hilarious because it was very dramatic. But I also remember being like, well, yeah, like you want someone that you can walk beside, like you. And to me, James not understanding that like he didn't need to always be out front was wild to me. But it makes sense in a generational sense, definitely.
I think it's important to actually unpack a little bit more about these shows because we talked about Martin and it became formulaic for comedians who have sitcoms to have the slightly or very lighter person and then her foil, her foil in the sitcom, whether it be Bernie Mac or, you name the comedian that had their sitcom, Martin. And then the other part about it, and I think this goes back to, I want to say it was, I forget who it was, the very first, so something about like, let's think about Walona, right? She didn't have the same kind of financial struggles, right? And so I wonder simultaneously if it's like, you can have the struggle of with a Black man, but if you're on your own, you might just be okay. And I feel like that was Pam too. Pam didn't have the same kind of struggles but she was always participating and witnessing the struggles of Martin and Gina. And so I wonder what other messages about before I'll have a Black man, I'll have no man is also there. And then also the entrenchedness of heterosexuality in all of it, right? Yeah. So
I mean, I think that I don't like Martin, never watched it. But I think for Good Times, I got the impression for Walona that we were supposed to feel bad for her that she wasn't married though.
Yeah.
She didn't have the struggle. It seemed like the same as income, but it's like, and even though she was a single woman, seemed to be happy with her life, it felt like there was still something there where I was supposed to feel bad that she didn't have a man.
Anthony, there was that episode where she said, I am alone. I am not lonely. She said it straight. She was like, come on, don't pity me in that one. Everybody has to remember that
I remember her having some, and I appreciated the episodes where there were men that were not going to give her the love that she wanted. But I still feel like in her times of being single, not with anyone, I felt like there was something where like you were supposed to feel like she was missing something. Like she didn't, it gave an impression that she wasn't complete or whole enough just by herself, even when she got Penny.
Hard agree on all that.
And I was going to say, I think even for Pam too, it was like in some way because she ends up dating Tommy and Martin, and Tommy, who we don't know what he does for a living. He does not have a job. And and it's a running joke. And like she ends up dating like these kind of randos in a lot of ways throughout the series until her and Tommy kind of like get it together. I'm not going to even touch the way they did like with the whole like fat phobia stuff with Cole and Big Shirley. That's a whole other 13th event. But yeah, I mean, I think that like the relationships in Martin and Good Times, and even something as recently as like, Blackish or like Anthony Anderson and Tracee Ellis Ross, like these kind of, very similar color and racial dynamics at play, have an impact on how not just Black people see and understand our relationships with each other, particularly loving relationships, but how the rest of the world, the way white folks are watching these shows and being like, okay, well, I identify with this, like, and that has an impact on how we think about race, how we think about love in general, and what's being sold to us about it. And I think our ability to, we talk about like decolonizing, when we think about love, like what love I think is actually supposed to be, what's supposed to be at the center of that. Yes, and Girlfriends, we could do a whole event on Girlfriends alone.
The researcher in me wants to know what products were sold in the commercials of each of those shows?
Yeah.
That is a great question. Can I say that I didn't like most of those shows because of the things that you all brought out, the colorism, the classism, and I could not have named this at the time when I saw those shows, but now the just the straight cisgender, heterosexual, patriarchal, particularly in the Cosby Show, and the way that that is sold as like the norm, and a lot of those shows came off to me as respectability politics, or this aspiration of how Black people should be. But I'm also mindful that on most of those shows it was white writers writing what their imagination of Black life was. And I don't want us to forget that part, that was it. And I really want to hear from Toyin. I know that you said A Different World. Were there other shows that really did it for you when you were growing up in London?
Yeah, so yeah, Different World. I found that especially during the 80s, the 90s, every show that we got of Black couples would be imported. So there was nothing British apart from, I could say, a show called Desmond's. I'm not sure if you got that over there. It's basically a British show, and it was an elderly couple that owned a barber shop, but they were from the Caribbean, so they weren't British. So nothing was Black love wasn't a British thing. So everybody would rush because it'd be imported. So you get the Cosby shows and the Different Worlds and all of these wonderful shows from the States, and that's basically where we would get our representation from. So yes, the shows, we obviously in this country it's very catered to the white gaze. So you don't, it's a rarity. Even now it's obviously getting a bit better, but they're pushing that narrative, and it goes back in history in terms of obviously interracial couples until we actually get wiped out. But yeah, that's what we used to. Those are the only shows that we used to get over here.
I'm always like really just interested in just the experiences of people, just like Black folks and other folks of color in other countries, because I've had convos with friends that are just like, well, it's different in like London, like in Europe, because they have all this, that, and the other. And when I'm speaking to people like yourself, or even just like I think social media, you'll hear like these kind of very similar kind of conversations happening where it's like, yeah, we have like, a few of these kind of Black couples, but that's not the norm, right? Like, in our advertising, it looks like this. Like, so we're all kind of being shown these very similar, not exactly the same. And the impacts, I think, are still the same though. Like the impact is still the outcome is supposed to be the same.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
I mean, I definitely have to agree because you have to think about who owns advertising, who owns all of these, the media. So obviously over here it's very white owned throughout. So we don't have we have BET, which obviously is from the States, but we don't really have any mainstream Black owned media. So we're going to be force fed that narrative, and it's the people who are casting us, directing us, they are all white. So they're trying to tell our own stories and control our narrative. So until we can actually be put in a position of power where we get to tell our own stories, it's always going to be them controlling our narrative, sadly.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things to remember. Toyin, you talk about the people who actually control the ads and everything. And one of the interesting things here is with the backlash to the interracial couple advertising and all of that, that there is this company that tracked the African American, Asian American, white, and Latino actors appearing in these types of ads. And they found that there was only one group where the percentage of actors in commercials increased. Guess what group that was? The
What group?
percentage of actors increased, huh?
Which group? The Oh gosh, black or white? I don't
No,
know.
it was white. It was white.
Oh wow.
The white in the United States, white actors in these commercials increased from 65.6 to 72 and change percent. Now, you know, that's not the percentage of white people in the US population, but these, when we look at the other groups, and for Latino, they didn't do a breakdown by race of Latino. They just did the Latino category. The actors, the percentage of actors went down. And so what is that saying then, even about, you know, the people who are driving all of this, even as they're trying to push a check the box narrative of we're for diversity and we're, you know, doing this, but they continue to have white actors overrepresented, interracial couples overrepresented, and actors in every other racial category, those percentages going down.
I think it's impunity. Like they get to act with impunity. I even remember an ad for, I think it was tampons or something like that by Kotex. And the advertisers actually told the consumers what they thought of them. They says, I am a racially ambiguous woman between the ages of X, between 20 and something else and that. And I'm here because I know you will buy something from people who look like
Yeah, it's
me.
become like a joke. Yeah, I've seen something like that too.
Yep.
And what's even, I remember a few years ago, like, I mean, and of course, like in America, you know, America's pretty big. Certain stuff you won't see. Like, I remember the first time I saw like an Asian couple in a commercial, and I was like, wow, like, I've never seen that. And I remember I looked it up, and it was like, yeah, a lot of those commercials are shown on the West Coast. Um, you know, here it was not always shown. Like now you can see a lot more, but I remember I was like, I did not always see Asian people, like, or Asian couples in any kind of commercial selling me anything. Like, and I remember being shocked. So even like when you think about not just like the strategy, but like even how it's shown in different parts of the country. Like, you know, what is selling in California on the West Coast is not what's selling on the East Coast. Like, there's so much strategy in it that it's actually overwhelming to even think about, you know, like how do they even approach this? And yet, once again, the end goal is the same.
The angle is the same and the audience is the same, right?
Right.
So, and so, I mean, like where we started was like we showed these pictures of two Black people in love, right?
Mm-hmm.
And learning then the circumstances around them, and then talking about media and how, or advertisement and how that works, and how that's very, very different. You're not going to see two of the same unless it works where the white imagination can insert itself for and that idea as Adar was talking about, in the white imagination, what's possible when you have an all Black something. It's one, it's given, we get top billing on the day after Thanksgiving or the day after Christmas for movies because no one else wants to go, right? That's when the Black movies comes out, right? Because the assumption is, like, you know, people with sense, red white people, would be at home with their families celebrating Christmas and some other kind of, like, you know, mythological stuff that we talk about.
And even like on like the Hallmark movies, like those used to be majority white movies because Hallmark is a very like conservative Christian like channel. That's who their audience is. But because the movies, I know Anthony makes fun of me for these, that's one of my favorite time of the season. Those movies are popular. Like, people look forward to watching these cheesy like movies, and so now they started like getting Black movies. And they only show them like one Saturday where you get like all the kind of like, what do they call them? It'll be like, the Essence kind of like films like Christmas movies, and it'll be like Keisha Knight Pulliam. They'll get her from
Moesha.
someplace. They'll get like, like they'll get Brandy to like come in one. And like, and the thing is like, you'll be seated because you'll watch it. But and they all of a sudden their towns are a lot more diverse. But the movie that was on last night, it's a predominantly white town, and it's such an interesting thing when you're looking at it from that perspective of like how media is like really impactful and what we think about, not just with the food that we're gonna eat or buy, or the things that we want to buy, but like the things that we buy into, like, and what love is supposed to look like, right?
I think that's one thing we could.
No, I was just going to say, and with those Hallmark movies, if you didn't see that there are Black characters, if you just read it, there's nothing in the way that they interact with each other that would signal, yes, these are Black characters. There's nothing culturally Black about them at all. So again, that white gaze that Toyin was talking about, all of those movies, even though they have Black leads, it is a white storyline, white ethos, white gaze, white everything. It's white. The characters, the Black characters, are completely whitewashed.
But then on top of that, the message of this is the love that you should be trying to obtain is that it looks like this, the way that it does for white people. And that's the love that you as Black people should be going after, specifically women, because that's also like their market, that it should look this way.
Yeah.
I'm so glad we're doing this the day before Valentine's Day, as we're contemplating love and relationships and all like this. Because this, if we're formulating our romantic expectations in large part based on what we've been sold
on a commercial holiday, right?
That speaks a lot to how oftentimes our relationships go. I mean, look on TikTok and check out the expectations of folk.
I think it's important to and I know that we were going to get to this, and maybe this is the right time to transition. Like, what do we have the autonomy to do and how we define for ourselves, right? And one of the things I just put in the chat was even around the images and like who it's sourced from and across the diaspora. So we have a lot of things to look at. Toya, and I don't know if you've ever heard of Kweli TV, but it is a streaming platform from all across the African diaspora. So it is the answer to Netflix about seeing yourself reflected. That has a very reasonable subscription or whatever. But I think that is one of the things. But how do we then start to decolonize? Because part of this was called Decolonizing and the decolonization and the I'm blanking. Economizing, decolonizing, and economizing Black love. How do we decolonize our ideas around what these relationships should look like? What we expect for people who want to gain our approval, our dollars, whatever.
I think for me, it is a lot of it is just like remembering that this is not just a story, right? Like even with the Obamas, right? Like they're not just a political couple. They're not just like any old couple. There is something that is being sold to me. Like you are being sold something constantly every time you walk down the street. Love Jay-Z and Beyonce. They're still selling me something. Right? It's like not just their music, them being together. They sell me something. Even though I was like hyped at his little Grammy speech, I was still like, and yet I think a lot of it is being able to remember what exactly is going on and not to put stock into these kind of just like the stories or the commercials or the ads, but that like there are real people on the ground that I can connect with, and I have to do my own work. Like that's why I think like with Bell Hooks, like she talks about what love is. It is intentional. It is an action, but it also takes real work, and that starts with you. Like it starts with me. And so I think, one of the things my sister and I have always, we've been recently speaking about is, the way that I love myself is the way that I want someone else to love me. And that means like I have to love myself fully, all of my flaws, all of it. And I want that's not something that I think that you can like tell in an ad, like in my opinion. So it's really, I think, doing a lot of your own kind of work around oppression and understanding how this system actually works, and that I can't put a lot of validity in the ad. I can only deal with what's real for me, and that's not necessarily real. It's a story, but you know that's just what it is. It's a story.
So in the US, Black people have $1.6 trillion in spending power.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is, incredible, an incredible amount of agency and power that we can be more mindful of and more intentional about what we're supporting, even in our viewing habits.
Mm.
Because it is that type of thing, like supporting the streaming service, Erica, that you're speaking about. If just like $1 billion, of support went into streaming services, or millions, then there would be other streaming services that pop up that reflect us and the type of love that support our families, that help shape our expectations outside of the white gaze. So I am just really hoping that this 13th of the month is viewed widely, and because that, to me, Erica's question is one of the most important questions behind what are we being sold, right? How are we going to spend our money? What are we going to support, and how are we going to demand that those images that we see are not images that are being sold to us about who we ought to be or what our expectations are supposed to be from a whiteness gaze?
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the issues that we have over here, I was at a film shorts. We had a London short film festival a couple of weeks ago, and I had this conversation with a filmmaker about making our own stories. And I was saying that a lot of the time when we want to pitch our own stories, there's gatekeepers that want the same narrative to be told. So it's not our love stories they want to be told. They want to tell stories of slavery and sort of, street, selling drugs and crime. And we don't get a chance to actually tell our own love stories. And so that's why we struggle. So I can't look at the television and say, yeah, this is basically a representation of what I want true love to look like. I have to find that within my own community. It's not on, I don't see that on the screen. I've got to look at reality and real life, and where especially when I look at my background, because I'm Nigerian heritage. So it's a case of I'm looking at my parents and, what back home, and that's a whole complicated love story in terms of when we look at the Black love story and how our parents and our grandparents did it, and a lot of them were kind of from polygamous households as well. So that's a whole thing in itself. Another conversation in terms of the Black relationship and the longevity of that. So there's so much, but yes, the television is not a place where I can actually find Black love.
And can I also add that, and I think that it's also important for us to show the realities of all of that. Like, one of the things that I know that I've had convos, like I've seen it on like social media, particularly like Twitter and TikTok videos, about what people want to see in these kind of like Black narratives, is that like also I don't mind seeing struggle. I don't mind seeing, the fact that couples from back in the day are different. Like, women have different ideals or wants, or that the wants are the same, the time is different. I think that we run into an issue when we try to, make everything like this kind of varnish, like, oh, well, they were in love and everything was perfect and we keep it moving. It's like, so even if you're talking about like the experience of like your parents, like, right, you mentioned like, you're Nigerian, or like folks that come from homes where, there was a single parent. I think it's important to show all of those experiences in our stories, in our love stories in particular, because love is not just is supposed to be hopefully for everybody, not just for people who have like the degree or the perfect job or where like who's in the perfect house. That everyone should be able to find that for themselves within their community. And I think that it's so important for us to show the realities of love. Like that's really what I also want to see more of. All right. So
I think that's a whole word. I just want to say, I think that's a whole word in general. Like, let's show reality. I mean, because if we're truthful about it, all kinds of like media and TV doesn't reflect really any kind of reality.
Yeah.
If I harken back to the TV shows that my mom watched, where they had beds and the actors had to keep one on the floor, as if they didn't have to come together to make those children and leave it to be there and things like that. So the abstraction is killing. It is stifling, it is limiting, and we cannot have that happen with us in our Black love.
Yeah. Well, I am going to start to have us close up. I want us, obviously, I hope everyone, if they do celebrate Valentine's Day, has a lovely one. Today is technically Galentine's Day, and that is another holiday that was actually from a TV show, Parks and Recreation, supposed to be just for your girlfriend. So hopefully you'll share this recording with your girlfriends or your friends, and maybe like spark some other conversation. But we want to thank you here from BRJA, for joining us on this lovely Tuesday. And we have some other events coming up next month. We do this every 13th. And so hopefully the next one, Wednesday, March 13th, you will see us for our next topic. And that will be on our website, on our Eventbrite, and on our Facebook. So we thank you for joining us, and we hope you have a good night.